Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Stoughton Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette. And our guest today, as we head into school board elections, Joe Ortona, chair of the English Montreal School Board, and Katherine Korakakis, who is the president of the English Parents Committee Association, and who is running. And they are running against each other in the school board elections. So this is the first time we've done this on the Corner Booth. Thank you both for being here.
Pleasure.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for having me back.
Joe, let's start with you. You've been doing this since 2020. It has been a very, I guess, call it a time of turmoil as far as school boards are concerned in this province. So maybe the first question I would ask today is, as you see it, what are the challenges that lie ahead for the English Montreal School Board?
Well, there's always several challenges. One of them is, how are we going to continue the high success rate that we've been able to achieve? I mean, we surpassed the private sector last year, and that's not something that comes very easily. So that's obviously something that we're going to be working on to improve and try to build on, but that's not something that comes easy. We've been maintaining our buildings, some of which are over 100 years old. We've increased in the amount of spending and renovation contracts that we give out. And the other challenge is, how are we going to preserve the rights of the English-speaking minority, preserving the right for school boards to continue to manage and control their system, preserve our right to hire the teachers that we want without arbitrary restrictions, and preserve our language, with Bill 96 and all the court challenges.
So Katherine or Bill, go ahead.
Katherine, yes. Joe came in at a very turbulent time, as you know, took over. I would suggest, everybody would suggest, some success in bringing the school board back to where it was, or on a better level. How do you propose to come in? What do you see as, what kind of changes do you see as necessary, and what do you propose you would do?
So for me, it's all about fighting for our community, as I always done. I think that that's very important, that we continue to fight for our community. Our right to control and manage our institutions is very important. But there's challenges that have stemmed up from the pandemic regarding mental health and the impact on mental health on children, and that impacts their success rate, their motivation. So for me, that's a big push to fix, because we are in an epidemic in Canada and in the world, so we have to address it. The other thing is, I'm really proud of our students and our teachers with a high success rate, but how much did you say?
95.9.
95.9% means that
95.9%.
95.9% means that those people got 60 and over. What I'd like to do, which is great, but what I'd like to do is focus more on subject matter mastery, especially with regards to French. I think that we live in Quebec, and we have to do more to equip our children to stay here and thrive here, and be able to be competitive here.
All right, so let me touch on that. That's interesting you brought that up, this idea of French. It seems to me that in the past, so Joe, I'll give this to you, the public school system here, the English Montreal School Board, has actually taken pride in the fact that is educating children so well in the French language compared to other systems. So is that a fair criticism?
I wouldn't say that it is. If we have a 95.9% success rate, which is the highest in Quebec, which is higher than what the private schools now have, that doesn't come with setting a bar of 60% and up. It means that the bar that we're setting is for the students to achieve the highest mark that they can possibly achieve. That's what it's all about. And when you look at mastery of different subjects, let's look at French. Our kids who are in Français Langue d'Enseignement, who write the same ministry exam as the kids in the French sector, score higher than they do. And they receive almost 100% French instruction. They only get 1 hour of English a week. Our kids receive bilingual instruction, and they're scoring better. So that means that we're putting the resources where we need to, and the teachers are prioritizing where they need to. And I think you have to give credit where credit is due.
I would ask as well, with respect, and I didn't know this was an issue, when you talk about mental health, Katherine, and we know that that's clearly an issue that needs to be addressed, what do you want to see change within the system that addresses that issue?
So we're not talking about intervention, I have to be clear. We're not talking about giving mental health intervention. What we're talking about is equipping our students with the language, the tools, and the resources necessary to be able to identify and deal with stress and anxiety. That's what we're talking about. And there's a lot of programs that exist already that are in the community that we could leverage to come in and help. Because I'll tell you one thing. The biggest complaint and the biggest questions I've received as president of EPRA for the last 5 years has been around mental health and the impacts of mental health on success and on motivation. So it's very important. But I'd like to go back to something Mr. Ortona said about the French and the Français langue d'enseignement. That's great that we have this. However, it's only less than 10% of our students that are writing this exam. What I'd like to see done is to put in more resources and work with our educators and our professionals to up that. And you have to go in early, right? We want our children to stay here. We want our children to be bilingual. So we need to focus our attention in getting as many children as possible to be doing the Français langue d'enseignement. It's super important.
What do you say to the 10%? I hadn't realized that was the number.
I don't know where that stat comes from, but here's what I know. We offer different language programs, and the parents and the students are the ones who make those choices. So it's important also to respect the choices that people make. But the important thing is that the kids who graduate from our system are fully bilingual. They're able to function. Many of them go on to CEGEP in French or to study in university in French, and that's really important. I myself am a product of the English public school system. I went to Nesbitt School in the French immersion program, and then I went on to Vincent Massey Collegiate, and I wound up studying at both Université de Montréal and Université d'Ottawa, and both exclusively in French, and I work mostly in French. So there are many, many success stories. The perception that people have to leave Quebec from the English public system in order to be successful is just false. Many of them are very successful here in Quebec, working in bilingual environments, and many of them working almost exclusively in French environments. That's really important to note.
You know, the bigger issue at hand here, though, is like, and I admire and respect both of you for doing this, is that you're both running for like an election here in a situation where we have such low turnout historically, and it's so critical, I would think, for the Anglo community to get involved. We're so concerned about losing any kind of power, having school boards, at our own discretion rather than like the government taking full control as they wanted to do. What's the plan there to get people motivated, to get them to understand how serious the situation is? I mean, we're talking about a turnout of 15-18% the last time there was an election. How do we get people involved? How do we make them understand it?
Well, turnout in the EMSB usually tends to be higher than the provincial average. It was 21% in the last election. But we also have to understand the government isn't doing anything to promote these elections, right? They're not doing anything similar to what they did in municipal elections, talking about the elections, encouraging people to vote. They put out ads in the radio and on TV. They're not doing any of that. They want the turnout to be low. It seems that they think that a low turnout sort of helps their case for wanting to abolish school boards. I don't subscribe to that at all. Turnout in municipal elections are just as low. They're in the low 30%, and nobody has ever made a case for abolishing municipalities and centralizing everything in Quebec City. So I reject this notion that the turnout somehow gives credibility to the existence of school boards. That being said, it's still important for people to become informed. It's still important for people to follow, and it is important for people to go out and vote. So we are there, presenting ourselves, making ourselves available to the public. The public has every means available to learn about who the candidates are that are running, what they stand for, and make an informed decision when it's time to vote.
So to that point, is it then a concern that if we again see fairly low turnout in an upcoming election, this just gives the government an opportunity to look at this and go, you know what, you obviously don't care enough to go out and vote for your English school boards, so we're going to decide to take more and more power away. And I'm not talking about Bill 40 necessarily and losing all power, but is that a concern?
It's definitely a concern. That's why we're working hard on educating people, and we're both doing it, trying to get the vote out there, right? It's very important people care about their institutions and care who's running them, because those people will set the priorities and the budgetary budgets to meet those needs. So it's super important. So it's very important people understand that whether you have children in schools or not, you can vote. And why should you care? These are going to be our future leaders. And of course, these are the only institutions we have left in the rest of Quebec that we manage and control. It's super important that people vote. Very important.
So, Joe, Catherine brought up before resources, talking about mental health when we were discussing that. Funding is also an issue that's come up in the past. So with respect to that, does the EMSB get enough funding? Do you have enough teachers? Are the resources there? Is that a concern?
So with regards to funding, look, I mean, we've been advocating for more funding for a long time. We know that what the government gives us and their entire funding formula puts us at a disadvantage, and it becomes challenging to manage the books. And if we want to really go after, anybody for lack of resources or anything in that regard, or shortcomings when it comes to money, then we need to be looking at the National Assembly. That's the real issue. The fact of the matter is, though, is that we're doing what we can with the money that we have. Again, when we talk about resources, whether it's in mental health or anything else, no school board or service center offers anything that the EMSB does not. We're always ahead of the curve. We're always doing better than the others. That's why we have the success rate that we have. That's why many people who live in the West Island send their kids to Royal Vale or Royal West Academy. Many people who live in Laval send their children to Laurel Hill or Vincent Massey Collegiate. We have schools in the West Island. We have schools in Laval. They choose the EMSB because they know that their children will achieve more and get better results than anywhere else in the province of Quebec. And the stats from the Ministry of Quebec shows that.
How fearful are you if there's a change? I mean, it's not exactly like the CAC has been that great to you guys to begin with, but how fearful are you if PQ comes in or not, if that will change anything?
I think if anything, this government has taught me that we must always remain vigilant about the defense of our Section 23 rights and our right to manage and control our school system, no matter who's in power, whether it's the CAQ, the PQ, or the Quebec Liberal Party. But I will say this, I mean, the people older than me who remember the PQ in power constantly tell me that the PQ wasn't as bad when it came to school boards. In fact, it was the PQ that created the elected linguistic school boards. So we're certainly, if a PQ government ever gets in power, going to have our challenges with Bill 96 and other language issues. But, we have to continue to preserve and fight for our Section 23 rights, no matter who's in power.
I want to ask a question, if we can get away from issues for just a second, and talk about the fact that Joe, for Catherine, Joe has been running the school board since we know a rough time back in 2020. Mm-hmm. And I think, we've spoken a few times as well about different issues. He's gone to bat. There are challenges to Bill 96, Bill 40, et cetera. Mm-hmm. What made you as someone, because you started before you got involved this way, as a parent,
yes,
as a concerned parent, now you head up a parents committee. What made you decide, I don't like something about what I'm seeing in the way the EMSB is being run right now. I want to be the person to run it. I want to be the person to change it. What's not being done now that you think could be done better?
So I think there's always rooms for improvement. I've talked about mental health. I've been talking about mental health for a very long time around the PC meeting, at government meetings. It is a crisis, and we need to do more. We have to do more. And EMSB could be a leader in this. We have to do it. Again, the subject matter mastery. Yes, we have excellent success rates, and I'm very proud of our students and our teachers. However, we need to do more, and we can improve. There's always rooms for improvement, and especially when it comes to français langue d'enseignement. What I'm hearing from parents and educators is that there's not enough programs in place to get more children as bilingual as they need to be to stay here. And as a parent, you don't want your children to leave. You want them to stay. And we also want to attract more parents to come to the MSB. We have all these parents that are rights holders that choose to send their children to French public schools or private schools. I want to get those kids back. They need to come back. We offer excellent stuff at the MSB, and we can make it better. So for me, that was the sense of urgency in running.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowden Deli, serving Montrealers since 1946 and home of the city's best smoked meat sandwich, the Snowden Deli, DeCarry Boulevard, north of Queen Mary Road.
Joe was saying, interesting. He was pointing out statistics that you guys are doing better, the school board, than the private school system is, and the Franco school system is on a lot of areas like that. How do you respond, Joe, to?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, she's saying, I want to get the kids that are going in French schools and private schools to the EMSB because we're better. And on the other hand, we're sort of not good enough because there's always room for improvement. The truth is there is always room for improvement. That's true. But we have to look about what this election is going to be about. And this election is about where the EMSB has gone in the last 4 years. And let's not forget that in 2020, the EMSB was probably in the worst position that it had ever been in its history. It was at its lowest point. We had just come out of a year of trusteeship. There was all sorts of turmoil in terms of governance. There were many, many issues of infighting, and quite frankly, the EMSB was considered, and it pains me to say it, but the EMSB was considered a joke. In the last 4 years, we're doing better by every objective metric that you can measure success for a school board. Better than all the other boards, better than the service centers, better than the ministry standards, and much better than we were 4 years ago. We've restored the reputation of the board. We're now a credible voice not only for education, which is our primary mission, but to be a defender for the rights of the English-speaking minority, something that the EMSB really didn't do before. So all of those things are really important. I mean, where we've gone in the last 4 years is quite the measure of success. And of course, there's always room for improvement. I'm not sitting here saying mission accomplished after 4 years, but we've set the base for what we can build on to make that path to success a much easier one for our students. And that's really important. And I think that should be acknowledged because that really takes everybody coming together. It's not just the chairman and it's not just the council of commissioners, but it's with the senior administrators, the directors, all the way down to the principals and the teachers and our volunteers in our system who are remarkable and second to none.
So I'm curious to Joe's point, though.
Yeah.
You heard him, and it's true. From 2020 to 2024, it's been a complete turnout. It's 180 degrees from a school board that was in trouble to one now that's not just done well, but is holding its own. How do you answer that? I mean, it seems like he's done a pretty good job.
Well, he was a part of the old guard that had all the turmoil and all the problems before the 2020. So I think it's... Well, he was. He was part of the council then.
Well, I see you're shaking your head.
Can I answer?
Yeah, please, sorry.
So he was a part of that whole thing. So yes, it's gotten better, but he was a part of it. So for us, it's about having more, listen, parents ask me to run. There's a reason I'm running. I'm not just running to run. We want to change things for our children. We want to make the school better. And we want to continue fighting for rights, yes. But he's not the EMSB is not the only one fighting for rights. There's a lot of organizations that are doing that as well, right? Okay. So I think that it's a collective coming together, and we have to work together to defend our rights. However, there's also running the school board and what that entails with our children and the successes there.
Well, when you say he's part of the turmoil, how do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I was I was one of the people sitting on the council, but it starts at the top. It's about the leadership, the people who caused all of the turmoil. Look, we have a 273-page report that was commissioned by Marlene Jennings at the time, who hired a human relations expert to look into the turmoil. That 273-page report outlines very clearly who was to blame for all of the problems that were at the EMSB, and thankfully those people aren't there anymore. So for the ones who were around, like me and others, we know what we had to deal with in that regard. And if anybody wanted to deal with the turmoil and be the leader when it was challenging to do so, then the time to do that would have been in 2020. And nobody stepped up to the plate to do that in 2020. I won by acclamation in my election there. So I mean, that's the reality. And then those people who caused a lot of that turmoil, I can tell you that they're not endorsing me in this election, and they're not supporting me in this election. And they did a lot of inappropriate things. One of them actually tried to use his position on the council and tried to influence to get himself a job. he's not supporting me in this election. In fact, he happens to be here, and I think that speaks volumes, who he's here endorsing and who he's here providing support to. So, if you want to associate me just because I held a seat on the council, let me tell you, we worked really hard to fix those issues. And the fact that I'm now the leader and look at where we've gone in the last 4 years, I think speaks volumes about my intentions and my ability.
I'd like to
Yes.
say something. So if we're talking about the democratically elected vice chair, yes, he's here supporting me. He's my vice chair, and he was elected by all the schools have representatives. They elected him to be my vice chair.
Are we allowed to mention names here?
I'm not going to mention names, but he's here supporting me. Of course he is, because we've been working together side by side as heads of the parents committee for 2 years. So I think that's funny that we would put into question somebody who's on the parents committee that was, again, elected by other parents, came here to support me. I think that's just very funny.
Well, to be fair, though, you talked about him being on the council, so this is someone who was on that council as well.
Yeah,
so it seems
exactly.
That's fair to bring up.
Who's on the council? He's on the parents committee.
Now.
Yes.
But I'm saying
Yeah,
back then.
he was in a similar position
So,
to
all right,
go.
we'll
Parent commissioner, yeah.
We'll leave that there. I want to go back to something else, because when I asked about funding, and Joe, your answer was, we always ask for more funding. The government obviously doesn't always follow through. You're talking about extra resources, being able to improve things. I'm guessing that would require funding, more money. What are the chances of getting that from a government that doesn't even seem to want to do that now?
I think it's about priorities. Let's get this straight. We're
Okay.
talking about priorities. If you want to prioritize something, then you put the resources there. That's what we're talking about, and that's why this election is so important, because as parents, we have different priorities. Of course, you defend and you fight for your community. Of course, there's no question. However, there's other priorities that we need to address for our students, for their success, for their mental health, for their motivation. It's super important. So at the end of the day, it's just about priorities and what's important for you in power. That's what it is.
One of the positives that neither of you brought up, which I find very interesting, when it came to finding teachers, I noticed on the French side they had a lot more difficulty. I might be wrong in assuming this, but than you guys had. Like, you were fully staffed, I think, at a certain point, ahead of the curve. I mean, this is what I've read, I've heard of. And I think that has to be credited too on a certain level. How are you able to find teachers at a time when, well, you're saying no. What do you say, Joe?
Well, what I'm saying is, in spite of all of the challenges that we face because of this government, and let's face it, I mean, education is certainly not a priority for them, and you can tell based on where they're investing money and where they're putting resources. The fact of the matter is, our Human Resources Department, our marketing team, everybody is working around the clock throughout the year, especially in the summer, making sure that the teaching positions are filled, making sure that throughout the year, if somebody goes on maternity leave or there are other absences, that those positions get filled as soon as possible. And we are ahead of the curve. You see it in the number of vacancies that there were on the first day of school in the service centers, vis-a-vis what we had at the EMSB. I mean, that speaks volumes. The other thing is, when we talk about priorities and when we talk about where we're gonna put money, it seems to suggest we need to invest in other things before investing in the core challenges. But if we're not investing in the core challenges, then who's going to fight things like Bill 40? If we're a service center, we don't have air purifiers in our classrooms. We're under the authority of the Ministry of Education. We lose our independence to make those decisions. I mean, I'm very clear that I'm against Bill 40 and I'm for the independence of school boards. That's very important. And the other thing is, you can't take a nickel and turn it into a gold bar. I mean, when you talk about we have to prioritize and we have to spend money, we don't have a budget with $10 million surpluses. That's what the old guard used to do. Before. They used to preserve that money and which deprives kids of services that they need right now. We give balanced budgets, and in fact, we dip into the accumulated surplus and take the maximum allowable amount to put in our budget to ensure that we're providing the maximum number of resources that we can. So whenever you talk about taking something and putting more somewhere, you have to find where to cut. Where are you going to cut from in order to balance the books? Because we can't run deficits. We're not allowed to.
Catherine, I want to ask to Joe's
Yeah,
point just
Catherine
now.
wanted to respond to.
Well, I want to ask about, certainly with respect to the government challenges, right? Joe has been very much in the forefront of that.
Yeah.
Do you agree that that needs to continue?
Absolutely needs to continue, but there's other people also fighting that fight. And I think as a community, if these issues are important to us, we also need to step up and do more as a community to support these challenges. But I want to go back to the teacher shortages, okay? Because, you know, I'm a parent, I can tell you myself, and representing parents, we don't have all the teachers we need, we're still missing teachers. So even if you're missing 1 or 2 teachers, those are still children that are not getting educated. It's still an issue, it's still important. So saying that we have all the teachers we need, that's not factual. I can tell you myself with my children, this is not factual. Or the parents that call me and say, I don't have a teacher, what's going on? And you know, you're walking them through what to do. You know, we still need to make sure that we have qualified teachers in the classroom teaching our children, because then what's the point? We're already in October, right?
Okay. With all due respect, Catherine, you sit on multiple governing boards.
Yeah.
You're the chair of the Parents Committee.
That's correct.
You're the president of EPCA. You sit
Yes.
on the Special Needs Advisory Committee, which we call Access, where you have direct access to the Director of Student Services,
Yeah.
who sits on that committee. I don't have an email, a call, a text from any school that's missing a teacher from a class. Like, where are these concerns being raised? If you're getting all of these parents coming to you about the resources that are lacking, the teachers that are lacking, as far as I'm concerned, the parents should be going somewhere, because
Yeah.
there are recourses to be able to address those issues. In 5 years, that's never happened.
So can I answer?
Yes.
Yeah, so the way that happens is there's a process, Joe. People don't send them, we wouldn't send them to you. You have to go to your principal, then you go to the regional director. What we do and what I do is direct them to where they need to go to answer that. It's not at the chairman of the Council of Commissioners. There's a process. I'm surprised you don't know the process.
No,
but there's a clear
I know the process.
It's not
Thank
to
you.
send them to you, it is to follow those channels, right? And that's what we've been doing, is following those channels.
But they don't have emails from you either, Kathy. I mean,
And they wouldn't have
I've
emails
checked.
from me. It's not from me. It's the parents that have to do it. It's not for me to get involved. So what I do, and what should be done, and what needs to be done, is you empower the parent on how to do that. It's not for me to say, hey, principal, I don't have a teacher. That's not the way it works. You give the parents the tools so they can feel empowered and they can do it themselves. And that's how it's always been. It's not for me to go after or to reach out to the different principals.
All right, I guess we'll leave it at that. I would just ask one thing, and a little off, I don't know, maybe off topic. So, Joe, you've been doing this job for a while now. Things have gone well. You brought up the turmoil, of course, that existed before you took on this job. It seems to me just about every other seat being contested now is by acclamation, right? There's really nothing else much going on except here at the EMSB. Were you surprised when you found out that you'd be challenged for this job?
I mean, I don't know. I didn't pay much attention to, if anybody was going to run against me or anything like that. I know my record, and I know what I provide or what I'm able to provide as a chairman, and with a strong team that I have. It is a democratic process, and anybody's allowed to run, and they're allowed to run on whatever issues that they choose. So I really wasn't paying much attention if anybody was going to run against me or not. So I can't say that I was surprised or not. It is what it is, and ultimately the people are going to have a choice.
Okay. We are out of time. I want to thank you both,
Thank you.
Katherine Korakakis, Joe Ortona, for joining us. And everybody, in the meantime, please get out and vote.
yes.
The vote is November 3rd. You'll have an opportunity to make your voice, have your voice heard, and you should, because it's important, more important than ever as far as English school boards are concerned. Thank you both for being here. We'll see you soon on another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast.
Thank you.